Welcome, folks. A good tavach, Shavua Tov, a good week, and a happy new year. Be a year of great, wonderful things that we should accomplish beyond our imagination. Even though it's not the Jewish New Year, our year preceded already a few months ago. But yet, as King David writes in the Psalms, Hashem Yisbar B'chtov Amim, that Hashem counts by the reckoning of the nations. So there is something about the nations of the world and how they count. And it's interesting when we look and compare. So the Jewish calendar versus the Gregorian calendar, and the qualities that make the difference between the calendars. So our calendar is both lunar, based on the month, and based on the seasons, and therefore based on the sun. So it takes both things into account, where the Gregorian calendar is only a solar one based on the sun. Maybe from there we're going to see some interesting things. The difference between our calendar and their calendar when it comes to the question of leadership. What does it mean, a real leader? Israel just had elections, seeking leadership in difficult times. The mantle was just passed over from one leader to another leader. America is, in the throes of an upcoming election. So what is it that we look for in a true leader that will get America out of its mess, Israel moving forward as it needs to, and in general, that's just leadership when we speak about it from, so to speak, the top. But in a sense, we're all leaders. What makes me a leader, or potentially a great leader, as opposed to merely a follower? So, of course, where are we going to draw from? The Torah portion of the week. That's our source. Living with the Torah portion, that it comes alive, gives us the opportunity for ourselves to come alive and to be true leaders, whether it's in the nuclear family, whether it's in, our local community center, our synagogue, or if it's in the general community at large. But we all are in some form a leader. Okay, so in this week's parsha, let us share. All right, here we are. Oops. So Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, our forefather, he is on his deathbed. Before he passes on, he blesses the tribes of Israel, his children. He blesses them with important blessings that is not just for them, but becomes actually becomes a blessing for the Jewish people for eternity. So he begins with the firstborn, who is Reuven. He has a special status, being the firstborn. And what does he do? He chastises him. Reuven, he says, you are my firstborn, my strength, and the first of my might. You should have been superior in rank and superior in power. That's what should have happened. You have, though, restlessness of water. Therefore, you should not have superiority. For you ascended upon your father's couch. Then you profaned him, God, who ascended upon my bed. What is this talking about? It sounds like a code word. Yeah. Maybe they use this in the Second World War, some kind of coding over here. Superior one means that you were designated to be, from you at least, from the tribe of Reuben, Jewish monarchy, Jewish leadership. But due to your restlessness, meaning that you sinned, you fortified the privilege of kingship forever. Oops, what's going on here?
Rabbi, can you please move it a little bit to the left because we can't see the whole.
Is it dark? It's dark and
blue. Yes, it is dark blue.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me just see if I can do something here. Ooh la la. I don't know, I can't get it from the dark blue. Oh, wait a second. Try something else. Apologies, I don't know what's going on. All right. Do you see now?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it says VaYechi again. That's weird. Okay, I have to stop this and start it again. Is it staying on the same thing?
Yes, it's all the title. It's one page.
Hold on, sure.
It's still saying VaYechi? Or
Yes.
Still nothing changed.
My apologies. I don't know what's going on. Is it showing you something different now?
It's good.
Text 1?
Yes. That's
Yes.
text 1. You let it, it's big enough, we can let it like it is.
You can read it?
Yes, we let it in this way before it started again problems.
Okay, so Rashi explains. Yeah, we're good?
Very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have the restlessness of water. What does that mean? The restlessness and the haste with which you hasten to display your anger, similar to water that hastens on its course. Like, the flowing river, it hastens, it goes quickly. Therefore, you shall not have superiority. You shall no longer receive all of the superior positions that you were fit for. Now that what was the restlessness that you exhibited? For you ascended upon your father's couch, then you profaned that name that ascended my couch. This is the Shekhinah, which was accustomed to going upon my bed. So Yaakov is referring to Reuven after Yaakov's wife Rachel passed away. That was his, dearest wife, right? Having 2 wives and 2 concubines, and from them fathering the 12 tribes. So now, where he used to make himself accustomed by the tent of Rachel, he now moved his bed, and his bed didn't go to the second wife, Leah, right? But it went to the concubine of Rachel, Bilhah. Reuven was very upset. Leah was shunned as a result. He didn't tolerate this. So in a moment of passion, he moved Yaakov's bed and brought it to his mother's tent, as he believed the rightful place where it belonged. The Talmud tells us it was taught in a brisa that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, what is the meaning of the verse in Reuben lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine? It does not mean that he lay with her literally. Rather, it means Reuben protested the affront of his mother. He said, if my mother's sister, Rachel, was a rival to my mother, will my mother's sister's concubine be a rival to my mother? That was too much. He immediately stood, rearranged her bed so that Yaakov would enter Leah's tent. So it's not meant to be literally that he lay with his father's concubine. No, it means he dealt with the personal affairs of his father and his relations with Bilhah. So it's not an outright sin, a severe infraction, right? Doesn't mean he was intimate with Bilhah. It means that he moved her bed, his father's bed, from her tent to mother's tent. This cost him and his descendants the privilege of royalty for all time. And who got it? Was the 4th son, Yehuda, as in the blessing to Yehuda. The blessing to Yehuda, it says, a cub and a grown lion is Yehuda. From the prey, my son, you withdrew. He couched, rested like a lion he will rouse him. The scepter shall not depart from Yehuda, nor the student of the law from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him will be gathered the gathering of peoples. The scepter is a scepter of kingship. It shall not depart from Yehuda. That's what the verse is Yaakov is telling his offsprings. And of course, that is a reference to King David, who will lead the Jewish people in his time, and from his time on, all royalty will come from the house of David, And the house of David, of course, is from the tribe of Yehuda. And it will ultimately culminate with the coming of Mashiach, who is a descendant of King David, coming from the tribe of Yehuda. Now, why is this? Because from the prey, what does he say? My son, you withdrew. So unlike Reuven, who lost the royalty because of his misdeeds, Yehuda earned it through his noble deeds, particularly because he rescued Yosef from death at the hands of his brothers, as Rashi explains on this verse. My son, you withdrew yourself and said, what is the gain if we slay our brother, cover up his blood? So this goes back to the days of Yosef when he came to check out on his brothers what he's doing, being obedient to his father's request. The brothers saw him from afar. They wanted to kill him, but instead he was spared through Yehuda, and he was sold off into slavery. And this earns him royalty. That's the first story of what occurred, that royalty was taken away from Reuven and handed over to Yehuda. But there's another event that occurred that becomes another reason for royalty to be taken from Reuven and his descendants and given to Yehuda and his descendants. And this has to do with the aftermath of the story of Yehuda and Tamar. Yehuda had 3 sons. He married off the oldest son, heir to Tamar. He died without children. Therefore, the law of Yivum came to take place, which is the Levirate law of a woman is now passed down to one of the brothers to marry in order that the seed of his brother should be maintained, or rather not lost. That's the second son marries Onan, but he also dies childless. She expects Tamar to marry the third son, but Yehuda has other plans, and she sees that, obviously she's not going to marry that son. So she devises a plan, disguises herself as a prostitute in order to seduce Yehuda. They have relations. Then it becomes revealed that she's pregnant. She had relations, and she is actually sentenced to death. And on the way to her sentencing, she says that I'm pregnant by the owner of these items that she got from Yehuda. And Yehuda realized what happened and realized that it came from him. And he admits his guilt. He admits his sin, and he saves the lives of Tamar and the unborn twin babies. Right? That was a couple of weeks ago in the Parsha, and Torah tells us. So Yehuda has the courage to publicly admit the sin and to bear the humiliation rather than send someone to death.
Why is she condemned to death?
But that was the law at the time. That was the law.
She was pregnant and it was a
Because she had illicit relations.
Okay.
No, she had illicit relations. That was the law at the time. But that's not the important point over here, right? A good question, Celia. You know.
I know, it's not
Yeah. I say no. You have a very good question. You have a very valid and good question. But let's leave that for the moment because that's not the focal point. You know, why would that be? And the truth is, I don't have a clarity on it. I need to look more into it because death sentence.
Thank you.
Death, you know what? Yeah, I need more to look more into it.
Thank you.
But sure, thank you for your question. But the important point over here, at least in the context of our discussion, right, is that he had the courage to admit his guilt and to bear the humiliation. Rather, he could have easily just, okay, the secret would never have come out if she would have been put to death. It was the wrong thing to do. He realized that he had to own his wrongdoing, and he does, with the humiliation that comes together with that. As a result, he is privileged, Yehuda, for the second reason, to be given the monarchy to him and his descendants. Okay, is that clear? Okay, let's take this apart because it's not so clear, not so simple, what we just said. Because if we put Reuven next to Yehuda and we compare them in both stories, it's not so simple. Let's understand. Yehuda convinced his brothers not to kill Yosef, but to sell him, right? When he was thrown into the pit. But before that, the very fact that he was thrown into the pit rather than killed, who convinced the brothers? It was Reuven. Reuven actually saved his life first. And said, throw him into the pit. His plan was that when his brothers weren't looking, what would he do? He'd rescue Yosef. That was his plan. Let's look at the verse. So the brothers said one to the other, behold, the dreamer is coming. So now let us kill him, and we will cast him into one of the pits, and we will say that a wild beast devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. But Reuben heard, and he saved him from the hands. And he said, let us not deal with him a deadly blow. And Reuben said to them, do not shed blood. Cast him into this pit, which is in the desert, but do not lay a hand upon him in order to save him from their hands, to return him to his brother. So the obvious question is, Yaakov is very impressed by Yehuda and how he saves the life of Yosef from the pit and selling him into slavery, when in fact it was Reuven who was the first one who made the effort to save his life by putting him into the pit in the first place. So why is Yehuda the hero? And this is one of the qualities of Yehuda that earns him the monarchy. And this is not a quality for Reuven that allows him to keep the monarchy. He's no less deserving, seemingly, Reuven, than Yehuda. And if you want to look a little deeper, Reuven's intentions were much more nobler than Yehuda. Reuven's plan was to throw him into, that he should be thrown into the pit, and later on he would rescue him. Yehuda said, let's sell him off. We'll make money. We'll make a profit from it. So why is Yehuda's act of withdrawing from the prey, is the words that, right, from that Yaakov uses in the blessing towards him, make him fit for royalty more than Reuben, who actually seems to be the better man? Furthermore, we can ask the same question about the mistake they both made. Reuben made a mistake with the bed of his father, right? Moving it from Bilhah's tent to Leah's tent. And Yehuda made a mistake with Tamar. Right? Now, if we look one versus the other, what will we see? The reason why Reuven, in the end, didn't return Yosef to his brother is because he was busy sitting in sackcloth and ashes, repenting for the sin that he did towards his father.
And Yehuda moved forward in his life.
The verse, the Medrash tells us, where was Reuben when Yosef was sold? He wasn't there, right? Rabbi Elazar said he was occupied with his sackcloth and ashes. He was doing tshuva. He was sincerely repenting. He was still fasting and praying after the sale of, this is after the sale, this is at the time of the sale of Yosef. When did he move? When did Rachel pass away? That he moved the bed of Yaakov, his father, from Bilhah's tent to his mother's tent? How many years ago was that? Before the sale of Yosef, 9 years. So when he returned to the pit, he was devastated, as the verse tells us. And Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Yosef was not in the pit. So he rent his garments, and he returned to his brothers and said, the boy is gone, and where will I go? So if we line up the portraits between Yehuda and Reuben, Yehuda saved Yosef's life, but for money. Reuben's, his intent was to bring him back home. Yehuda acknowledges the sin of Tamar, but only for the moment, right? In that moment, he recognizes. Reuben, though, is busy with the sin. For 9 years, he's repenting. If that's the case, why is Reuben stripped of his position in favor of Yehuda? How do we make sense of that?
Because, can I say it?
Go ahead.
Because Reuben was sitting in sadness, and sadness is decluttered the soul and neshama. So,
Not if you're doing tshuva. He was doing tshuva.
but
He was doing
9
tshuva.
years, 9 years, God is a forgiving God. So God forgave him the moment he
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you can't do tshuva 9 years later. Sure, you could. You're on a higher level. You're more sensitive. You're more aware. So you can still do tshuva. Tshuva means to return to Hashem. You can first do tshuva on one level, but then tshuva comes from the heart, and the heart has many layers to it. So let's say 9 years ago when you did tshuva on something. Today, you're much more sensitive, you're much more aware, you're much closer to Hashem. The tshuva you would do now from your heart would be a deeper one, a more profound one that would bring you closer to Hashem. So if you do tshuva today for something that was done 9 years ago, right, that's not a bad thing, right?
But isn't it that we should not get stuck on it? We should move forward.
I mean, it depends who you are. If you're Reuben, it depends who you are. And anyways, I mean, there's something to what you're saying, but let us continue, and we'll see more. And the point that you're making, there's some validity to it. We'll see how, but in a different context. Okay. Give me one moment. I just need to get some Mayim Chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu shehakom v'barach.
Amen.
L'chaim.
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 Okay. So, Shirley, good point. Let us come back to that, okay? Okay, we have some good questions. So, to understand why Yehuda was chosen for leadership over Reuven, we need to understand what royal leadership is really all about. What is the role of the king in the nation, in the Jewish nation? Of course, he's responsible for the judiciary, the police force. He directs the army, taxes the nation, provides for its needs, oversees the country's economy and welfare, ensures social and judicial justice. And in one sense, the equality, those are some of the functions that he needs to fulfill. And to have that capability, a king has to be beyond the people. That's what royalty is, a unique quality of a soul. It's a unique quality. Now, we all have qualities of the soul. What is malchus, royalty? So, you think about the quality of our soul to be kind. So we have a quality of being kind. And of course, kind means you need to bestow upon another. But the quality is there even if someone isn't there to bestow it upon, right? The quality of our soul to have chesed, to desire to bestow upon others, is a quality there, even if others aren't there. It will emerge. It will come to fruition. When you engage with another individual, of course. But the quality is there nonetheless. Likewise, when it comes to gevura, power, strength, creating boundaries, right? In a relationship, being able to say no in a relationship, sometimes that's necessary. That's gevura. Does it exist before you say the no, before you create the boundaries? Of course. Before you engage with another individual? Of course, the quality is there. But royalty is something different. It's a quality that only has value when there is others. Because to be a king, to be a leader, means there's followers. A king cannot be a king without a nation. Ein melech b'lo yam. There can be peoplehood without a king, but you can't have a king without people. Text number 6 from the previous Rebbe. The sphera of royalty is different from all other spheras. This can be explained in terms of the qualities of the human soul. In the case of the attribute of kindness, it can exist even if there's no beneficiary of that generosity. One who is inherently a good person has goodness and kindness in their heart. And if they happen to encounter someone who needs it, they will extend that kindness and goodness. Moreover, this internal quality of kindness can manifest as a feeling, even if it is not directed to anyone per se, as is seen by the case of the patriarch Abraham, who always experienced a feeling of kindness. Therefore, after Abraham's circumcision, when God made it exceptionally hot outside to dissuade passerbyers from burdening Abraham, it bothered him because The kindness was manifest within him. However, the attribute of royalty, which is a soul quality of preeminence, cannot exist without another person. As we see empirically, someone lost in a desert, a barren desert, devoid of other people, does not experience the attribute of preeminence. There's nothing to be preeminent over. There's nothing to be, above and beyond. There's no one there. As the Medrash says, even God, who's the King of kings, cannot be a king without a nation. And that's why the very first thing that Adam Arisha and Adam did after being created was to lead all of creation in the crowning of God, that God is king. So this leads us to another key element of royalty. Not only must there be a nation for there to be a king, but the king's entire identity comes from the nation. It's only by the choice of the people that the king is a king. Right? We're not talking about a despot. We're not talking about Henry VIII. We're not talking about those who coerce others. That's not a king. That's a despot. That's a dictator. Call him a king, but not really a king. So even if a king finds a people to lead because he wants to lead them, well, he can't lead them unless they accept him and his rule. As the Medrash tells us, the nation appoints the king, and the king cannot appoint himself if they do not appoint him. Now, once they appoint him, he is the bright light that illuminates upon them. And ultimately, the people are subordinate to the king. However, the whole makeup of the king is by the people. Therefore, he can only be there for the people. If he forgets that, if he's not caring, kind, patient, discerning, tolerant, but rather he is arrogant and not taking care of the needs of the people, he's not a real king. So the people must revere him, as Maimonides says in the Laws of Kings. They must revere him, but yet the king himself is lowly and empty of heart. My heart is void within me, as King David said. King needs to be gracious, merciful to the small and the great, and involving himself with the good and the welfare of the people to protect the honor of even the most humblest of men. When he speaks gently, as one would conduct themselves with great humility. So his whole identity as a king, not as a person, but in the role of a king, his whole identity of that is only given to him by the people. Therefore, his whole being as a king is only there for the sake of the people, that they should be successful. Therefore, if he gets caught up in himself, even if he gets caught up himself in lofty spiritual pursuits, but it's not for the welfare of the people, he may himself be a great spiritual, righteous individual, but he's not a king. The king is fully focused and devoted to the people. Takes full responsibility for the people. Financially, emotionally, spiritually, even physically. So if there's a problem, an issue, it's his issue. It's a matter that he needs to deal with. Because as king, he was given that power by the people. So he's there only for the people. That's his whole reality and personhood of a king. Is that clear? That's why when a king bows down in the Amida, he stays bowed because he is so humbled. He can't even pick himself up. So the king is all about the needs of the people. So let's now go back to Reuben and to Yehuda and pick up where we left off with the questions that we had. Reuben seemed to be more caring or concerned for Yosef in the sale than Yehuda. He seems to be more repentive when it comes to the misdeed that he made and owning it than Yehuda and his misdeed of together with Tamar. Yet, as we will see, in those two instances, Reuben was not acting kingly, where Yehuda was. Because it's not enough about what you do. It's also about what you do and how you do it. So when Reuben sinned with the couch, the bed of his father, he had good intent. Mother was shamed. He wanted to right what he felt was wrong. But in doing so, what he really did, in fact, was cause more harm than good, both for himself, his father, and the whole situation. So the Rebbe explains. This week's parsha, this week's sicha. Reuben had the restlessness of water and hastened to display his anger. After concluding that his father's bed belonged in Leah's tent, he got upset at someone else and acted swiftly and immediately to interfere with his father's bed, thus hurting another person. This behavior is the opposite of helping others. As we said, he was well-intentioned, but in the end, he did more damage than good. He wanted to help, but in his actions, they were actually counterproductive, the opposite of helping others. Let's see with the story of Yehuda and Yosef. What happened there? Yosef is thrown into the pit because Reuben suggested to the brothers to do that rather than to kill him. He was still alive, but he didn't save him. The pit was without food and water, and not only that, it was full of scorpions and snakes. Sooner than later, he probably would have died. Very simply, the brothers went to go eat lunch, and Reuben went to pray and fast because of his great piety for the sin that he had done to his father 9 years earlier. Now, on the level of piety, Reuben is top notch. He's preoccupied with fasting and praying, right? For the misdeed that he did. While at the same time, what is Yehuda doing? Let's sell him off and make some money. But this is the issue when it comes to leadership. Intentions are personal qualities, and personal qualities is not what makes royalty. Royalty is about the achievements that you succeed in. How much did you really help another? In the end, Reuben failed. Did he help Yosef? No. Was his intentions pure? Yes. But he didn't help him. Who did? Yehuda. Yehuda got him at least to be sold rather than to be killed. So yes, praying and fasting is wonderful on a personal level, that you are a pious, wonderful, good person who's always trying to improve your life. But when Yosef is lying in a pit surrounded by his brothers who are eager to kill him, was this a time to focus on your own piety? Or should you be putting that aside and focusing on Yosef? He needs you. Take care of him. Who in the end then saved him from the calamity of death. In the end, it was not Reuven, it was Yehuda. Because Yehuda, even though his intent was not pure, we can make $1 from this. But in fact, he saves the boy. The 17-year-old lad is saved. So Rabbi explains in this week's Sikha the difference between Yehuda, we're drawing from the prey, and Reuven says this: when Yehuda withdrew from the prey, he actually saved another person. When Yehuda said, what is the gain? He saved Yosef from his brother's plan to kill him, and he took him out of the pit, which contained snakes and scorpions. Although Reuben's intentions were nobler than Yehuda's, that has to do with his own personal qualities and has nothing to do with the ability to benefit and save others. When he said, let us not deal with him a deadly blow, cast him into the pit, in order to save him from their hands, to return him to his father, it tells us about its intention. But practically, that didn't extricate Yosef from the danger of starving to death in the pit. Right? And what does he go do? He starts to go pray for his own sins. You didn't finish taking care of your brother. Now let's go even a little deeper into this story. We're going to see subtle hints that demonstrate the flaw of Reuven's attempt to save Yosef. When the brothers wanted to kill Yosef, Reuven said, cast him into the pit, which is in the desert, but do not lay a hand upon him. And then if you recall, when he returned, he said, how can I return to my father? And Rashi says, to save him, the Ruach HaKodesh testifies for Reuben that he said this only to save him, so that he would be able to come and take him out from there. He said, I am the firstborn, the eldest one of them all. the sin will be attributed only to me. So the first part was okay, he wanted to save him. But then it says that Yosef was worried. I mean, so it wasn't that he was worried about Yosef. He was concerned for Yosef, right? He wanted to save his brother. So, no, it's all going to come unravel. It's all going to come out that it's my fault because I'm the firstborn. I'm going to be the one held responsible. So he was more concerned about his reputation than helping another. That makes a good non-Jewish king who care only about their reputation. They don't care about another. That's not a Jewish king. Verse says, and Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Yosef was not in the pit. So he rent his garments, and he returned to his brothers and said, the boy is gone, and where will I go? Rashi says, where will I go? What does that mean? Where will I flee from my father's pain? His first concern is, where am I going? Not what happened to the boy. I'm going to have to deal with the guilt. My father's going to be in pain. I'm the firstborn. I'm going to be held responsible. What he cared about was the personal fallout. That's not royalty. That's not taking care of others. That's not thinking about others, being there for others, giving to others. So we see very clearly in this why Yaakov refers to Yehuda as the one that saved him, and not Reuben. Because in the final analysis, indeed, who gets the job done? Yehuda, who is very holy with sackcloth and ashes and prayers and great intent to save. Reuven, even that intent might not be so pure. Okay, but it's about himself being pure, not being there for another. That's not royalty. So, and finally, we also see the difference between Yehuda and Reuven in terms of the second quality. Right. First quality is about caring for another, being there for another, making a difference in another. Right. An actual difference. So in the second scenario, which is another quality, is about Yehuda and his willingness to acknowledge his sin with Tamar. Now, even though this was in the moment, it wasn't lasting, it wasn't over 9 years, right? As Reuven was concerned over what he had done. Excuse me. Reuven, for his part, is the first person in the world to do tshuva properly. It seems in this instance, the tshuva is something that we need to learn from. But the Talmud tells us something very interesting. That Yehuda's confession that he's the one guilty for Tamar is really is really what inspired Reuven to confess his own sin of interfering with his father's lineage. Talmud tells us Yehuda admitted that he has sinned with Tamar and was not embarrassed to do so. And what was his end? He inherited the life of the world to come. Reuven admitted that he has sinned with his father's bed and was not embarrassed. And what was his end? He too would have life in the world to come. Who served as an impetus for Reuven to admit his sin? It was Yehuda. Now, even though the story of Yehuda happened after the story of Reuven's bed, the story of Yehuda and Tamar, but yet Reuven never confessed about the bed until he saw Yehuda and the courage that he had to confess publicly. As the Chizkuni says, Reuven was first to admit his sin privately. At first, he admitted his sin privately, with a sackcloth and fasting, but he did not confess publicly. However, when Yehuda said, "She is right, it is from me," Reuven got up and publicly confessed, "I too have sinned. I interfered with my father's bedding." So now here's the important part. The Talmud wonders why Reuven felt the pressing need to tell the whole world that he was the one that had sinned with the bed of his father. Why did Reuven have to publicly tell this? I mean, aren't sins like this between us and God? So, and like, what does he gain? What does Reuven gain from now publicly after the, I think it was sometime afterwards. So the Talmud answers, so long as Reuven didn't publicly confess his sin, his father never really knew who moved his bed, meaning that all of these years, he could have suspected any of the brothers of the crime, as the Talmud tells us. Granted, with regard to Yehuda, it was proper that he admitted his sin in public, so that Tamar would not be burned. But why did Reuven admit his sin in public? Didn't Rav Sheshes say, "I consider one who specifies his sin in public to be brazen, as one who who does so indicates that he's not embarrassed by his actions." The reason was that his brother should not be suspect of committing the deed. Okay, so the reason why he says it publicly that his brother shouldn't be suspect for the deeds. But here's the problem. How come he didn't come to that recognition on his own? Although all that time, in Yaakov's eyes, he didn't know who was the one responsible for doing that act, right? So he did tshuva for it, but there was still suspicion on his brothers. In other words, what was he concerned about when he did tshuva? His own regret, his own salvation. But he wasn't concerned about his brothers. He wasn't concerned that maybe the father's going to look on his brothers and think that it's his brothers. Now he's only concerned about his own spiritual welfare, right? But not on anybody else. The only time he recognized that, I got to think about this, is when Yehuda publicly confesses his sin. So that gave him the courage. Now he could do it on his own. In other words, he wasn't able to take a responsibility for his own actions on his own, totally, until his brother does. This is the other quality of royalty, total responsibility, right? First one was about your actions, that your actions make a difference. And here it is total responsibility. He has to be inspired by his brother to take full responsibility. And he was thinking of himself the whole time, and that's not leadership. That's not responsibility. Responsibility for others, right? So here he takes full responsibility, Yehuda. He admits it right away. He takes complete ownership. Royalty, kingship is complete ownership. Complete ownership in what you need to do to be there for the people. And if you can take ownership of the mistakes that you make without hesitation, as Yehuda does, then you can take complete ownership for the things that you need to do to be there for the people. Reuben, on the other hand, doesn't take complete ownership. He's only concerned about himself and his spiritual welfare. So he's in sackcloth and ashes. He's praying. But the whole time it's a private thing. No one knows about it. At the same time, father is suspect of the other brothers. Right? Only taking note from his brother, Yehuda, does Reuven recognize, oh, I need to publicly declare this, right? And take responsibility. True leadership is taking responsibility, not because you're told to take responsibility, not because you see others taking responsibility, because you take responsibility. That's true leadership. Why do you do that? Because that's the trait of royalty. It is taking full responsibility. How does that come about? When you take full responsibility in a manner of action. So you can have full responsibility and intent, but it's not intent that's necessary. It needs to come into action. So where in the sale of Yosef, Reuben has wonderful intentions, but those intentions were also self-directed. Whereas Yehuda, his actions lead to the saving of Yosef. Taking out of the pit, not being killed, and being sold into slavery. Yeah, not the best option. But that act made the difference. So we all have, in conclusion, the quality of malchus, tamida, that we all have in us, an attribute, a power of the soul. And we all have some form of leadership. So the ultimate quality of leadership is that it's not about me and even my spiritual well-being. I can put aside my spiritual well-being for the sake of another. To be a holy roller, you got to take care of yourself. To be a leader and to activate that quality of leadership, it's not about me. It's about what I'm needed for by the people. So we're holding almost 30 days before Yud Shvat, the 10th of Shvat, when the previous Rebbe passed away in 1950, and our dear Rebbe became Rebbe, filling the shoes of his father-in-law. And it's the Rebbe's first Hasidic discourse that we just started this morning, learning every morning, 7:05 in the morning, which is only 4:05 in California. AM. We learn Vasi Lagani Maimer, Hasidic discourse. And in that discourse, the Rebbe says that as Moses was the seventh generation and all sevens are endeared, so too we are the seventh generation, as the Rebbe from the Alter Rebbe is the seventh Rebbe. So we are the seventh generation, and this is the endeared generation, where we have full and total responsibility that the Rebbe gave over to us, each and every single one of us, that we could change the world for good. And we have the power that when we bring it into, about just doing what you got to do, bring it into action, and taking full responsibility. When we take that full responsibility and bring it into action, then we will have great effect upon the world around us. And this is the seventh generation that we're going to bring Mashiach. We're responsible for that. That's how great the Rebbe is that he can make us simple folk. We're not a Ruvain, we're not a Yehuda, but he empowered us with such great capabilities like no other generation, that we have the capability of finally bringing Mashiach now. Okay. Any questions?
Well, that was wonderful, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
I did have one question
Sure.
about Mar. I was reading last week in the Midrash. It said that the reason she was going to be given that consequence was that possibly she was still promised to the youngest son, even though Judah didn't plan on fulfilling the promise.
Right.
Is
So
that
on her part, she was completely properly exonerated. What she did, we actually learned this a couple of weeks ago in the Torah studies, if you recall. We learned about this, I think it was 2 weeks ago. 2, or was it 3 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago, yes. She was in the right for what she did to and Yehuda also. In other words, on one level, it was completely legal. He gave a ring, a signet ring, which was like a ring of marriage, right? And as we learned then, from there we learned that you get married with a ring. Furthermore, the fact that he did not give the third son, that meant that there was now no responsibility or relationship between them. The Levirate marriage was annulled, and therefore she was a free woman. So for her part, she was 100%. And as she was a prophetess, knowing that she would have to have children that would come from Yehuda, thinking it would be from his sons, in the end, it would be from Yehuda directly. And therefore she did what she did. And even Yehuda, even though on one level it was, inappropriate, on another level it was all legal. Technically legal, and so on. And yet, what do we see from that action? Who is born? The progenitor of Mashiach. But from that union comes Mashiach.
Amen.
Yeah. So I mean, the death sentence given to her was not correct. She was, not deserving of it, but because of her greatness and humility, and that she was to bear the child that Mashiach would come from. Yeah. And it happened through this very unusual manner. All right, folks, we're coming back for more. All right, all of you, just about. So TRC is in 13 minutes. Oh my gosh. Everybody has a link, right? Everybody has a link.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Celia, you
Yes.
have the link, right? Okay. Wonderful. Okay, we'll see you shortly.
See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Rabbi.
Thank you.